Welcome to the J Ray's Nerd Show. I am excited to be here with you. Man, I've had this idea for such a long time, but it's been one of those situations where it's like, do I do it? Am I interesting enough? Do I have enough things to talk about? But you know what? I decided it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just want to share some of my stories with you, and that's what this show is about. This show is about sharing my nerd likenesses, my nerd facts, my nerd journey with you. And you know, it's kind of funny when I first started about doing this show, you know, in the name and everything like that, I actually took the time, I don't know why, to look up the word nerd in the dictionary. And to be serious, like, for a second, I was shocked by the definition as a whole. Like, it's a noun. Okay, we're gonna read this. It's a foolish or contemptible person who lacks social skills or is boringly studious. Now think about that for a minute. Now I get there's a lot of people out there that when you think of the term nerd, right, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? You probably see somebody's basement. You probably see a kid in his basement, most likely wearing glasses, most likely playing video games and doing absolutely nothing. Well, my argument is nerd is the most all access pass to everyone that has ever existed ever. So, and here's my argument on it. So think about it this way, okay? Let's relay this to sports. Let's relay this to the National Football Leagues, for example. And I know some of you don't watch football, but a lot of you do, so let's go with it. Now think about that super fan. Think about, let's say, Bills Mafia, the Buffalo Bills. And you think of their fans. You see the guy that's dressed up. He has the jersey. He has the face paint. He's got the red and blue. He's got the hat. He's got himself throwing himself through a table for his team. Now tell me, how is that not a nerd? What is the difference between that and think of when you think of cosplay, right? Costume play. You think of that man or woman, boy or girl, or whatever, dressed up as Deadpool, and you're like, look at that nerd. Well, I tell you what, I feel like everyone can be a nerd, and you know what? You know what the best thing about that is? It's actually fun. You know, I actually kind of started my journey. It wasn't even on purpose when it comes to like nerd things. I side more along the lines of video games, right? And one of my earliest memories that I can think of when it comes to video games specifically is when my parents got me the Atari 2600 for Christmas. Now, I can't remember how old I was exactly. You know how like memories kind of fade in age and time frames like don't matter once you become an adult? Yeah, and if you haven't hit adult stage yet, you'll know what I mean. Like, nothing ever actually stays in your brain for some reason or another. But I remember this specifically. I remember waking up, it was Christmas. I don't even think we lived on our own at the time. I think we lived with my grandparents or something. I can't remember specifically. And I remember opening the Atari 2600. I was 5 years old. Now, you have to think about this for a second. I was born in 85, so now I've aged myself. By 1990, right, we've already had the Nintendo Entertainment System. We had the Super Nintendo, you know, things of that nature. And the first system I ever recall getting was the Atari 2600. So, to put it in today's terms, right now we had the PS5, we had the Xbox Series X, or S, or whatever they decide to call it. Currently, that's like, instead of getting a PS5 for Christmas right now, that's like getting like a Nintendo 64 almost. Okay, maybe not that serious, but it's still, I'm not saying I wasn't happy about it, but like if you think about it in retrospect, it's kind of funny to think like all these other systems were out, and the first thing I get was a Pong console. But let me tell you something, I loved that Pong console. The Atari 2600. I keep on saying Pong console because I just got one. But anyways, sorry. The first system, like I said, I had got the Atari 2600. And the first game I can remember getting for it was Pitfall. Now, Pitfall is kind of a basic game. Think of Indiana Jones. so to speak, right? Think about the scene specifically where he's like running away from the rock. He's trying to escape. He's using vines, things of that nature. That was basically Pitfall. Your goal was to go through this various like jungle setting that had crocodiles or alligators, whichever one, scorpions from what I can remember, death traps. It was a lot for the Atari, if you think about it. And you're just this little sprite, and you can jump, you can, walk, things like that. And I remember, and I swear it's true, you wake up on Christmas. You never wake up at a normal time. Anybody that has kids or been a kid, obviously, has known, like, when it's Christmas time, if you're waking up late, you're waking up way too late. You're supposed to be waking up at like 3 a.m. the second you know that, because some of I know the second you waited for your parents to fall asleep, right? You waited for everything to be just perfectly quiet. You sat there for a second, and you ran downstairs. Even if if it was just the one present Christmases, because I know not everyone's blessed to having, or everyone celebrates Christmas, but, just think of that notion, like just even like a birthday gift, you're just so excited. You're so ready for it. But I remember, so what I'm saying is I woke up, it was early. We started Christmas right away, right? And I can't remember anything else I got that day, but I remember I think it was the last gift or second to last gift. For some reason, my family always liked to give me cologne, but that's besides the fact. I opened up the Atari 2600 and with it, Pitfall. And from that second, I took that, hooked it up to the nearest TV. I think they had a secondary TV or something, like it was like a boob tube, basically, like the square TVs. Not the TVs you think of nowadays. It's look it up. Look up a CRT TV. You'll know what I'm talking about. I can't remember the size specifically. I remember I started playing Pitfall. The night was coming. My mom wanted to make sure I was in bed. So I was like, yeah, Mom, I'm in bed. What she didn't know is I just turned off the TV, kept the Atari on. The second everything got quiet, it was almost like Christmas again. I woke up, turned the TV on, and I played Pitfall. And I do not remember going to sleep that night. I remember specifically I was playing, and then my mom opened the door like to say good morning to me or something, or to wake me up, and the sun was up. And next thing I know, I'm still sitting in front of the TV playing Pitfall. And I'm pretty sure she asked me, she's like, what are you doing right now? When did you go to sleep last night? When did you fall asleep? And I was just, typical kid fashion, I was probably like, I don't remember. And I tell you, since then, my journey into this kind of stuff has kind of flourished. Another thing I remember is back in the day, right? There was a huge problem with kids being kidnapped in the 90s. And I remember that at one point, the Blockbuster, rest in peace mostly, I think there's one left at this time, Blockbuster, a place you used to be able to go, listen to this, kids, where you can rent movies and video games. And I mean like physical movies and video games. It wasn't like a digital download or anything like that. It wasn't an app that you opened. You walked inside a store. You looked at these actual items that actually existed, were to be able to pick them up, read them, and decide if you're going to rent it. Well, Blockbuster partnered up with Scruff McGruff, which was the crime dog or something like that, if I can remember. And what they were doing is they were doing these videos. You can come in and have yourself videotaped. I'm not even going to explain videotapes right now, but you could get yourself videotaped as a kid. And what you would do is you would say your name, your age, and like your favorite movie or video games or whatever, things of that nature, right? Well, I swear, and this is where my nerdness continues. Like, I'm also a troll at times. Like, when things are happening that are like maybe too serious, I kind of take it on like a different end and try to be like silly with it, right? So even at that point, I'm like, oh man, my mom's taking me into the Blockbuster, which is cool. I didn't know this was all going on. But what was not cool was the fact they were there to make sure that we weren't going to get kidnapped, Or if we did get kidnapped, at least there'd be a video basically showing like, this is what my kid looks like, this is what he sounds like. It's kind of dark, like if you think about it, but that's a side note, right? I remember the guy asking me like, hey, what's your age? And I was probably like 8 at the time, and he's like, hey, so what's your favorite video game? And I said, Booger Man. I like Booger Man a lot. And as an adult, I don't even remember playing that game. And then, ironically enough, I looked it up because I was like, that doesn't even, like when I was thinking about this memory, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And I swear I was having a conversation. I'm like, that just doesn't sound right. Like, why would I say that and be 100% making it up? Well, it turns out that the game Booger Man actually exists. It's real, folks. It's real. Look it up on the internet. Google it. Ask Jeeves, right? Go to Internet Explorer if you want to learn about it within a year's time frame. But and it makes me like kind of think like, was I playing Booger Man for real at that time? Was I trolling? I feel like I was trolling. Like I feel like maybe I thought I was like, I'm gonna pick the dumbest game I can think of and use that as my answer, because I know by then I had to have the Nintendo. And that's the funny thing, like after I got my Atari 2600, right, of course the next step, logically would be the Nintendo Entertainment System. But I remember I actually didn't get the Nintendo for a long time. The first time I remember playing the Nintendo Entertainment System was actually at a friend's house. Can't remember his name. This was a long time ago. These are all memories that have faded thanks to, adult beverages and things of that nature, right? And I remember, though, specifically that we played ice hockey all the time. And the people that have played ice hockey Nintendo, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember that game. That game was awesome. And the people have no idea what I'm talking about. They're like, God, this guy's old, right? This guy, he's probably like 100 years old, even though I'm only in my mid-30s. So ice hockey was... I don't know how else to say it, was an ice hockey game. But it was 3 versus 3 plus a goalie, of course. But the thing about it was, not only could you pick your country specifically, like USA, USSR, I think was at the time, Ukraine, Sweden, I think was on there, Norway was on there. I can't remember them all, so don't hate me. But you could pick the size of your characters. And what I mean by that is they had 3 different sizes. For every character that you had 3 different sizes for each one. So you could be a skinny guy, a super skinny guy, almost looked like a pencil, so to speak. He was super fast, right? So like that was his ability, so to speak. But his inability was... like, you could just knock him over. Like, if you're playing defense and the skinny guy was coming flying past, you just hit him, he would lose the puck. You had the normal guy. He was balanced all around, but, like, he was just normal. Like, he could skate normal speed. He could shoot normal speed. He could defend normal speed. And then we had my personal favorite is you could be a fat guy. The fat guy... even though he was slower, he was amazing at defense. Like, you could just, like, knock people over. You can get into fights and typically win for the most part, even though I always felt like it was random, right? And and then you just play ice hockey. So you would have these, like, wild arrangements. And I kind of wonder what the, like, mathematical amount is. Somebody who's smarter than me, just do that math, like 3 times 3 times 3. I think that's what it is. I think. I don't know. But, and then you would play ice hockey, and then you'd shoot, score, things of that nature. Anyways, so that was my first entry, believe it or not, into the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, a lot of the first game most people probably played was Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo. A lot of the Nintendo came out with it. The Nintendo kind of grew its baseline from Mario. And just for me personally, I just remember playing ice hockey all the time. If anything, I feel like I went backwards because I did play Super Mario Brothers. And I remember that this was pre-internet time. It's weird to think that I existed in these time frames, but it's true. So this was like pre-internet time. And so when you would find or you would get magazines to learn about the secrets on Super Mario Brothers. So I remember when I learned that you can climb on top and skip into these warp zones. At the time I was like, whoa. I'm going from a game, Joust. It's one screen. It just goes on forever, right? There's no like other levels. There's different ways that they program the game into this game that has like 8 worlds, and each world has like a different background, underground, underwater. There's a castle I have to take on. Just like a huge leap, technological wise, from my eyes, going from the Atari, not saying anything bad about it, but it's just a fact of life. If somebody who just was brought up in this generation, they have games now. I don't want to skip too far ahead because then I'll run out of things to talk about. They have games now that are basically like you're watching a movie, right? You're watching a game go out. You're hitting some buttons. It's amazing like how far we've gone technological wise when it comes to games, and that's why like. One thing I always hear, not to get too far off topic, is, video games specifically that can't be considered art. And I've always been a huge proponent of that because just because it's not a specific brand or a specific type of art doesn't mean it's not art. I always thought that, even sprites from back in the day, certain sprites, not all sprites are created equal, right? Certain sprites, you think of Mario, right? A lot of you know who Mario and Luigi are. They have been basically everlasting since the 80s. I even have the Mario Brothers, believe it or not, on my Atari system. And Mario didn't even start with the Super Mario Brothers franchise. He actually, it was Wrecking Crew, if I'm not mistaken, or Donkey Kong, not the Donkey Kong you think of today, but the Donkey Kong where it was like more of an arcade game, and he would steal the princess, stand on top, throw barrels down at you, and you basically had to climb your way up to the top, and by the time you got there, he would just escape to somewhere else. But yeah, think of Mario and just the different ways you've seen him drawn. He's been in movies, not always good ones, which we'll definitely talk about. And he's been in animated series, things of that nature. I feel like I consider that art. But nonetheless, I just really am excited to share, just all these stories with you. The Atari 2600. If you've never had an opportunity to play it, I don't know where to tell you to go and find something like that if you're interested. I guess you can look on YouTube, but the thing for me, and this is where I'm old school, and it's not always the best to be kind of stuck in your way. I do enjoy watching Let's Plays, or what they call it, or streams or live streams, whatever terminology you want to use, of somebody playing a game and being good at it or even being terrible at it. But there's nothing like being able to play it yourself, and it's if you have the means to, I guess I should say. Because obviously I always haven't had the means to do these things. But when I say the Atari 2600, like, you can experience it on YouTube. You can look it up and watch somebody else play these games, or they have long plays, things of that nature. For some reason, the Atari specifically for me is always like a fun system for me. Like if somebody comes over to my house and hasn't played it, like I try to get them to play it. Because they kind of understand, like, not like you can't complain about graphics nowadays, but when I show somebody graphics, quote unquote, I'm throwing quotes in here like you can actually see it. When somebody complains about graphics, I always go like, well, here's Pac-Man on the Atari 2600. And if you Google or look up Pac-Man on the Atari 2600, it's a hot garbage of a mess. They definitely didn't transfer a lot of arcade games over well at that time into the Atari 2600. The memory alone just wouldn't be able to handle it. So what I'm saying to you is, if you have a local game shop, not GameStop, don't be confused, a local game shop that sells like retro games, definitely try to check it out. They do sell it online. It's not very expensive. Even if it's just something you're interested in checking out, they have a lot of plug and plays of these machines now. They have the Atari Classics, if I'm not mistaken, on the Xbox One and the PS4. I don't know if they're backwards compatible for the most recent set of systems, but I feel like I just try it out, have a little bit of fun with it. Get your kids involved with it. They'll definitely call you lame, and they'll probably call you lame and then you'll call me lame for even suggesting it. But I always tell people, I'm like, try the Atari. And that's the thing. It's like, it's history, right? On a side note, another nerd-related topic. I am so excited about King Kong versus Godzilla. It's a movie. It's coming out recently. So if you're listening to this in the future, you'll be like, man, I'm going into the past here. But I'm so psyched about it because for me, and this is going to be a problem for some of you, I'm Team Godzilla all the way. Like, I have a DVD set that it's like Godzilla in a vault or whatever, and has like almost all the Godzilla movies. Not all of them, because you can get really far into those things, but it has like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, Godzilla versus Mothra, Godzilla versus Ghidorah, Godzilla, you know what I mean? Just like infinite amounts of Godzilla. And well, they've been like making these movies again, and with new, cinematic, events, making it just look just insane compared to the original Godzilla. Bless the gentleman's heart. Can't think of his name, which makes me a terrible person, of course. But that's how our brains work, right? I'll think about it like 3 weeks down the road. I'll be like, oh yeah, it was this guy. But Godzilla used to be a guy in a suit. Like, I don't even like, if you think about it like a character or something, like a mascot, right? A mascot. It's a person in a suit. Now, thinking about, instead of just 45 minutes of a football game or whatever, that person has to be in that suit, think about an entire filming process wearing a Godzilla suit while acting, which is much different than, and I'm not trying to give actors like £1 million of credit, because God knows they don't need it. But imagine at the time, and this is when they did, stop reels and stuff like that. Imagine filming a movie as Godzilla. That guy is probably the greatest guy of all time. I feel like I should look it up while I'm like talking to you right now. But anyways, maybe that could be your homework assignment. Look it up and then tell me in the comments who wore the costume of Godzilla. Costume, I guess, is the right terminology. Anyways, so think about going from that to now. Yes, it is kind of lame, but a lot of it is CGI. But I do think like the Godzilla movies do still use some practical effects, which is something more along the lines that I enjoy. Practical effects being like physical items that are messed with. So sometimes, for example, when they would film Godzilla, the houses in the town that you would see would actually be like miniature models. So if you ever go to the store and like see like miniature villages and things of that nature, it's basically like that, but they put it in a movie setting, so to speak, just to destroy it, as the monster. Versus CGI, which does have its benefits. It's a green screen, or sometimes it is an actor and they have like different modules on them and they can act out that character, but it'll be like a CGI version. Like, I know a lot of people are familiar with Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Like, that was an actual physical human being, acting like Gollum, but obviously it was like CGI and changed. So it didn't look like a person running around. It looked like that creature. But anyways, so they finally, it's weird. I feel like the movie's been in production for a while, and unfortunately we had an event last year that everybody knows about. Everybody and their mother knows about, that kind of, delayed certain things. But I kind of noticed there hasn't been a trailer released for it. Now, they did recently finally release a trailer, but it was kind of weird. Like, if you followed it, you're like, I know the movie's coming this year, which is 2021, but I haven't seen anything like trailer related to this thing. And then they pushed the movie back, or forward, I should say, where it's coming out next month in March. I'm recording this in February, And it's like, well, okay, so now the movie's coming out soon instead of later, and you haven't put out a trailer. So it actually, to be honest right now, and this is why I want to put this on like verbal record, I'm kind of nervous about it. I don't know about you, but like if you even follow these kinds of things, maybe this is something I can bring interest into you. But it's never, and it's not like I need a trailer, I guess I should say. Or, yeah, I don't know how to word this. But it makes me nervous that the movie might be bad, right? Because a lot of movies that are good, there's a lot of marketing pushed behind it. Now, this company might not have the funding. I think they do. They have more than enough. But, like even bad movies, for the most part, they'll have decent funding for the marketing. For King Kong versus Godzilla, I feel like it's almost, and maybe it's like an interest thing. They've made money in the last couple of films, so maybe somebody can correct me on this. It just seems like marketing-wise, and it might, it could be because of the whole situation that happened, but it just seems marketing-wise, there hasn't been enough information. I don't know. So, yeah, once again, tell me in the comments if you're excited about the King Kong versus Godzilla, because I know I definitely am. I think I might have to take my dad, because I remember him liking those kinds of movies, and he doesn't really like going to the movies. Who knows? So I know I'm taking my buddy Mel. Shout out to you, brother, because I think we made a bet or something. I can't remember. On a side note, on another nerd-related note, can you believe how much the Nintendo Switch has been selling? It's astronomical. It's funny, not to get back on the Nintendo train. We're kind of going full circle now, but Nintendo has, and I'm not a fanboy of theirs by any means, but they're a company that fascinates me in like so many different like ways, like as a business. Because think about this. So the Nintendo came out, obviously, and this was after the video game crash, and I'll probably have a whole episode on that, so I don't want to get too far into it. But basically, there was a time, and I can see it happen again, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to foresee. But there was a time where video games, there was a crash in the market. Like, there wasn't enough faith, there wasn't enough hope, there was too many games. Like, it was just ridiculous. Well, Nintendo kind of, like, so to speak, like, drug it out of the trenches and made video games a thing to do again, So think about Nintendo this way. And this is for their physical parts. I won't get into like the handhelds. Well, I will a little bit. So they went from the Nintendo, which sold really well, to this Super Nintendo, which sold well again, right? And then they did the Nintendo 64, which didn't sell very well. And then they did the GameCube, which once again, even though as neat as the GameCube is, and there's a lot of nostalgia behind it now, it didn't do really well. And then finally they did the Nintendo Wii, which a lot of people, which I feel like I can talk about the Nintendo Wii for a long time, and I probably will, but I want to finish what I'm saying here. The Nintendo Wii sold buckets. It sold buckets. I don't know if it's still their highest one. I probably should do more research before just talking like a crazy person. But then, for some reason, they released a Nintendo Wii U, and that basically failed. I should say it just failed. And, people are thinking like Nintendo, like you went from, being like sort of serious, but still kind of like, just doing different ideas with your gaming. You went into the more of the casual market, which was the Wii, and then you confused the market, which was the Wii U, because everybody thought like it's just an addition to their Wii, but it turned out to be its own system. That's a whole different story, but still, like, at that time, even if you listen, like I used to do a podcast with my brother. Even I, at the time, like, I try to defend companies when they make like new ideas, because you don't want to become stale. Becoming stale usually makes things a little bit worse for you company wise. So you always want to innovate. And Nintendo, for sure, I give them credit for trying to innovate certain things, but they kind of like stay in their way. like get in their own way while they're innovating, if that makes any sense. And so I was disappointed in the Wii U because I thought the Wii U is what the Nintendo Switch is. Like when they were doing the marketing for the Wii U, yeah, they did show people inside the house, but they showed it with a gamepad. And you know, for years of gaming, anything that's handheld usually means you can take it wherever you want. But what I call the Wii U now, before I get on to talking about the Switch, what I call the Wii U now is I call it the Nintendo Switch on house arrest. It's a horrible term for anybody that's been under that situation, but it's basically like the Switch because you can play I should say some games on it locally, but you can only stay within your house. And if you have a big house, or it's like the compartments are wide, you know, far away from each other, like a long house, sometimes the Wii U still wouldn't connect to the gamepad. It's ridiculous. Well, Nintendo finally came out with the Nintendo Switch, and I really, really enjoy the system, and I'll tell you why. Like, my wife and I, she and I get along better than I could ever expect. And I know what you're thinking, like, God, this guy, he's smooching on his wife, he's just earning brownie points. But no, I'm being for real. It's not always easy to be around me, and I know this. You know, being a military veteran, I have days where, like, my mood are just, like, grumpy old bear wanting to fight another grumpy old bear. And she has to live with that, but she also gets days where, like, I'm just, like, out of my mind, like, joyful, you know what I mean? And, you know, and that's another story. But anyways, I like spending time with her, but Sunday is usually a time preserve where I like to be alone. It sounds kind of sad, but like there's times where like just mentally, I just like kind of just like need to reset myself. And usually during those times, I'll play video games. Well, what I've been doing or what I do is like, let's say I want to dive into a video game. I kind of feel bad because like I'm taking time away from somebody who actually like cares about me and I care about them to do something that I like, you know what I mean? And I feel bad about it for some reason, even though she tells me all the time, like, it's fine, you know, it's just mentally, I just have a hard time with it. And so the Nintendo Switch kind of solves that in a way because what I can do, even though, yes, I'm still playing a video game, I'm playing a video game right next to her. So she can watch her shows. I'm not going to tell you what shows she watches, but sometimes they're really bad. You know what? I'll just tell you anyways. Like, sometimes she watches this Vanderpump Rules show. And I know some of the ladies out there that might be listening to it, heaven forbid that if you are like, oh, yeah, that show's so great. But it's me growing up, like, in, like, not the best ways, like, financially, and watching these people complain about, like, or like yell at each other. Yes, this is me admitting that I've watched it, but I try to gain interest in what my wife is interested in. But they'll like argue over like napkins, you know what I mean? And I just like start raging on the inside, and like the veteran in me starts popping off and just wants to like, you know, knife hand them while yelling at them, like helping them understand they have no idea what real life is like, you know? But so I go back down to my Switch and I just start playing a game on it or whatever. But the reason why I love the Switch so much is, like I said, like it's truly, truly handheld. The Switch is the system itself. As long as you have something that you can charge the beast with, and I don't mean beast because it's big, but I mean beast because it's awesome, then you can play a lot of the games that you own, like, well, every game basically, unless it's internet required, I should say. Wherever you want. We took a road trip with it. It was me, my wife, and then my nephew and my niece. And we were driving from Indiana up to Wisconsin. I live in the Midwest. And we'll say it's like a 4-hour trip. The way my wife drives, she's like Mario Andretti. It took like an hour and a half for a 4-hour trip. Not for real, but it's a little scary. but so we played Mario Kart, and it was Mario Kart 8 specifically. And I like to think that I am good at video games. I like to think that I've over the years have gained some sort of mastery of what video games and playing video games are fairly well. My niece and nephew straight destroyed me in Mario Kart 8. like destroyed me. And to the point where like I honestly was like mentally not broken, you know what I mean? But just uh, uh like I felt like because I have a collection of games, like I'm a collector, but like not super hardcore, and we'll get into it later. Um, but it made me feel like I should go home, take all the games I have off the shelf, put them in a trash bag, and just throw them outside, and be like a like a puppy box, which is messed up, but like free to get home. One of those situations. It was so embarrassing, but awesome because you got to think about it. We were playing a game on our screens in the same car through a video game system, and I like to think it's my favorite one that I own right now, but that's kind of hard to say because I I I have a lot of systems. It's probably a problem, and I probably should see somebody about it. But the thing I always tell people, sorry if you hear that noise in the background, my cat is just gone cray cray playing with the ball. But the thing I tell people is I've been collecting video games since honestly I can remember. You know what I mean? Like ever since that Atari 2600, I've kind of tried to keep up and like try to keep these things preserved, so I can use them. And now that I'm an adult and I have a tiny bit less free time, which is another conversation. You know, I like to play. I like to play those old school games sometimes instead of playing my Xbox or PlayStation or whatever. I rather like just recently I got a Pong console and I'm trying to get that thing to work, which I have two of them now, which is funny. But anyways, side note, yeah, I just like just going back in time and playing some of these old games. Now, to be fair, some of these games have not aged well at all. A game my brother and I used to play a lot when I was young was called Siphon Filter, and it's for the PlayStation 1, and the guy's name is Gabe. I can't remember like his full name, I just remember his last name. And you're like a special operative, and you have to stop this biochemical weapon, you know, something along those lines. And I remember when we played it back in the day, I thought it was like the coolest game ever, right? And we found ways that you can kill like your partners and stuff without getting mission failed and things of that nature because we're terrible people. But I went back to play it again like most recently, and it's still fun, but like button wise, like I don't know how to explain it because I've gotten used to like when you come to like a first person, a third person shooter for or action game for like the new systems, you have like every control does something. I feel well back then it's like one control did like everything. And so I went to go back to play it. I felt like I didn't even know how to move because it just was like a whole different level of just craziness. But yeah, so like I said, you know, not to backtrack, the Nintendo Switch, I honestly think is doing so well, and I'm so glad that it's prospering. News is on the street that they're gonna do like a Nintendo Switch Pro, and I just hope they don't do what they did with from the Wii to Wii U. Like I hope that if it's a Nintendo Switch Pro, like a 4K edition, and it can handle this much RAM or this much blah 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 blah. Like I hope it's like genuine new and it doesn't confuse the market again. Like if that makes any sense, because I'm nervous for them. You know, I'm nervous because right now they're like on a hot streak. You know, they found their niche, and this is where I come into the information with their handhelds. So every time Nintendo did something wrong with their physical, like at home market, they improved that with their handhelds. For example, the first handheld system for Game Boy, or excuse me, I already said it, but Nintendo, the Nintendo Game Boy, and that thing lasted. They didn't stop manufacturing that thing, I think, until 2008, and it started like super, like so crazy, like to think like it lasted so long, you know, and it was just like a green screen. Basically, people said it's black and white, but it's definitely not black and white. It's like a Ninja Turtle spit, not to get gross. You know, they did that. They did the Game Boy Advance. They did the Game Boy Color. You know, they did the Nintendo DS. They did the Nintendo DS XL. It just kept on going and going. And finally, they got to the Nintendo 3DS. And Like, they were sticking with that for a while, right? But then they stopped making that, and I swear that's where they put all their focus on the Nintendo Switch, because the Switch is a home console. You can play it at home, but it's almost more like a mobile console. Not like a cell phone, but like a portable one, I should say. And so that's the hugest downfall for me when it comes to that is actually the online component. Anybody knows Nintendo's online component is like, it's hot trash fire. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's so bad. Like, yeah, you can play multiplayer, but to talk to somebody, minus Fortnite, I should say, you have to use an app usually on your phone. So you're like playing the game, but talking to the person through your phone. Like, usually when you do online gaming specifically, it's all like one unit. You know, you plug your headphones into the controller and you're rocking and rolling. Anybody that's part of the PC Master Race, they're like, well, you don't have to do any of that stuff. Playing our games. No disrespect for you. But, yeah. So I'm just nervous. Like, if they do, excuse me, this Pro version of the Nintendo Switch, I honestly hope that they market it correctly, so people know that it is an upgrade and not like a secondary version of it, and they tell people why upgrading would benefit them beyond the screen resolution and things of that nature. Because obviously, since it's selling so well, yeah, it's selling well right now because a lot of people have to stay at home, you know, but it's also selling well because they actually have like good third-party support. Like, it's not just Nintendo games coming out. They have good third-party support. Like, Borderlands came out for it. You know, I could just go on and on. I could just list a million. I just don't really feel like doing it. And then their marketplace is okay. It's just there. If they could fix their online component somehow, I don't know what that would look like. It would probably come at cost. Because to be fair, this is the last thing I'll say about it, and then I'd like to get to my final topics before I close out my very first episode. Thank you for listening. If they can figure out their online component, it would cost more, because right now, like I said, good thing for it only costs $20 a year. And usually it's like, for Xbox, it's like $60 for gold for a year. Plus, you know, if you want all this other stuff, the PlayStation the same way. And you get some games, but I will say the PlayStation and Xbox's online component are like millions of miles ahead of Nintendo's. Even if Nintendo did probably like 40, 45, and then increase their capacity for internet gaming, utilizing just their game system itself as the audio, like Fortnite does, I think they would just do even better. And I'm hoping that's something that they bring into the new Nintendo Switch. And then I feel like they would just skyrocket to the moon. All right. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about before I close out was one of the funniest. I'll tell you the funniest thing that recently happened to me when it comes to gaming. So just recently, I bought the Nintendo from the Nintendo Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And anybody that knows anything about the game, it's garbage. I just wanted it for my collection. Well, I should say this story isn't funny. It's like just more cool, I guess I should say. Well, while I was like searching for games beyond Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because I want to add like weird games into my system, I've always been wanting to get Rob the Robot. Now, he technically deserves his own podcast. A lot of people have talked about him. I don't know what more I could say about Rob that hasn't been said through videos or funny videos or anything. But what Rob is basically the robotic operating buddy. And he came out with the Nintendo when it first came out. Like, everybody remembers Nintendo for Mario, but I remember Nintendo for Rob. Because Nintendo, when they're getting to sell their Nintendo into the U.S., they needed Rob as like a toy because they're more marketing towards the toy/video game market instead of just a huge straight up video game market, if that makes any sense. And people bought it. And now he's super expensive to buy. So I've been looking for this little jerk for years. I'm telling you, years. But it's always been like more than I'm willing to pay, because I mainly just want them for decoration, so I could look at them and be like, oh man, I still think you're cool. I don't know how to explain it. It's like weird Toy Story crap, but I just been wanting them. They're always like $120, not sure if it's working, or I've seen somebody and I wanted to rage on them, but I kept my cool, but they colored them purple and they're like, and they put unique Rob for sale. I'm like, it's not unique. You painted the poor thing. But so on Marketplace, not to sell anything, but this guy was selling a Rob, and it was fairly inexpensive for how complete it was. There's like a way to make it complete. It has the spinners, has everything. I don't know. Has the gyros, not the food, but the little like toy gyros. And he was selling it for like $120, which is a really fair price. And to be fair, I should have like been like, hey, can you wait until I can afford this? Because I need it. Then I can get it. But, I was kind of keeping it real with them. Like, I messaged the guy, and I was like, hey, man, would you be willing to go any lower on Rob? Because I'm not using him to resell it. Like, people buy these things to keep them and resell it. Me, I just want them as a decoration for my house. You know what I mean? For my video game stuff. And the guy's like, well, I have a few more Robs, which, A, blew my mind. Usually if you have Rob the Robot, they're so, like, weird and market-wise that usually a person only has one. But this guy had, like, 3 of them, he told me. And he's like, I'll sell it to you. I was like, well, so I'm thinking, like, okay, he's going to say $100 for the Rob without the stuff, and Rob with the stuff is $120. And he said, he's like, well, because he could look at my Facebook page. Well, it's locked for the most part, but he's like, well, it looks like you're into nerd stuff, so I'll sell it to you for $60. And I was like, done. Done. I will. I turned into Liam Neeson. I was like, I will find you, and I will hurt. You know what I mean? Like, I will find you, Rob, and I will kill you. No. But so yeah, it was so cool that this guy, and so we went to meet, and it was kind of shady, to be honest with you, or suspicious, I should say, because he's like, meet me at this White Castle in Hammond. I was like, oh God. I was like, well, let me wait till after work. I called my wife on the way home. It wasn't like a farewell kind of call, but I was like, hey, just letting you know, I'm meeting this suspicious person who I never met, selling me something for $60, which is under cost, at a White Castle. She's like, don't get yourself killed. And I'm like, I think it might be too late. I think I even told the guy like what kind of car I had. So he knew even if I was trying to escape, he could like T-1000 me and just hunt me down and basically just murder me if he wanted to. But no, it was actually pretty cool. So we met at this White Castle parking lot, and the guy got out. He showed me the Rob. He was a little dirty, not like purple paint dirty, but you know what I mean? Just like from like a little dusty. It just seemed like poor guy was just chilling in a box. And I was like, for $60, I'll clean this beast. I don't care. That's like nothing to me, And so we exchanged, and like I called the wife on the way home. I actually put Rob in my passenger seat, and I was like, I was thinking about maybe just keeping him in my car with me. So anytime I go somewhere, I can make a show and like videotape it inside my car and call it Rides with Rob. And so like Rob and I would just go somewhere. And if you think that's a good idea, definitely comment about that, because I think that's an idea. And if you steal that idea, at least give me like 1% royalty fee. I don't even care. You know what I mean? You're welcome for the idea on Rides with Rob's, or Ray's Rides with Rob, because that's my last name, right? But anyways, so that was just like a really cool moment for me to finally, after all these years, that I've been looking, I finally got Rob. He's not complete, but I don't care. I'm so happy that, he's at my house, and I cleaned him up. He looks legit and things in that nature. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. I really appreciate the time you've taken to kind of listen to this. It's trying to keep them under an hour long, because everybody's got to get along with their day, that kind of thing. But if you have any questions or any suggestions or any stories you want to share that I can share for you on this is an open forum. A lot of times it'll probably be me just shooting a breeze with you, talking about nerd stuff, things I'm excited about, teaching you some history, just kind of some fun things along the way. I'm going to probably bring some friends in for them to share their stories. And like I said, it doesn't nerd. The one thing I want you to come away with during all this is nerd is not just for the culture that they're typically known for. Like if you're into carpentry, if you're into cars, if you're into anything, as long as it makes you happy, be a nerd about it. You know what I mean? Just nerd out. Tell somebody else. Share it. Even if you think it's dumb, you know? I mean, there are some things out there that are maybe a little bit too weird. Like if you like eating fingers, you know, that you might need like a doctor, so to speak. But, you know, just like if just love what you love and who cares what other people think, you know? Be a nerd. That's all I can say. Well, this has been the first episode of J. Ray's Nerd Show. I really hope you appreciated the time we had to spend together, and I hope you have a fantastic day. And know, out of all things, you're nerdy.